Hello from Los Angeles, California, and welcome to Getting Started, a series of interviews about how inspiring people started their own careers and what advice they have for you to do the same thing. My name is David Newman. I'm a co-founder of HAPS, and because of the advice and mentorship I received from others, I've been fortunate to have a fun and rewarding career. I created this series as a way to pay it forward and help others do the same thing. And my guest today is one of the most inspirational people I know. He's the man who's made more episodes of children's television than any other producer and the creator of one of the iconic series of our generation, Inspector Gadget. Andy Heyward, welcome to Getting Started.
Thank you, David. My privilege.
Thank you for being here with us. I'm going to start right at the beginning. You had such an interesting start. Tell us about how you started your career and why.
Well, I began at Hanna-Barbera Productions. Unfortunately, I didn't begin as a writer. I began working in the warehouse at Hanna-Barbera. My intention was always to be a writer. And even today, if people ask me what I do, I say I'm a writer. I was seeking to get a job at the studio, and the only opportunity that was there was working in the warehouse. So I took it, and I started submitting my ideas. Every day I would send them over to Mr. Barbera's office, hoping that I'd be given an opportunity to work on one thing or another. And of course, never got anywhere. I'd go visit his assistant every morning and bring some ideas to her and ask if Mr. Barbera would read them. They never went anywhere, of course. And I continued working in the warehouse until one day, out of the blue, Mr. Barbera said, he used to call me Kid, said, "Kid, come on, you're going to work with me now." So I was given a job as a apprentice writer because JB, as he was known, Joe Barbera, who was the greatest salesman of all time, had sold too many shows, and they didn't have the capacity to produce them all. They didn't have the writing staff or anything. And he said, at that time, I have to share, I believe Hanna-Barbera had 100% of the ABC Saturday morning schedule and about 50% of the NBC and CBS Saturday morning schedules. That's all there was. So he had sold a show called Yogi's All-Star Laugh Olympics, which was actually a sort of a spin-off of an idea by a legendary broadcast executive, Fred Silverman, that was called the Battle of the Network Stars. But this was the battle of all of the animation stars. There were three teams: the Yogi Yahooies, the Scooby-Doos, and the Really Rottens. They were all Hanna-Barbera characters. And Joe said, "You're going to work on this show with me." I had never worked on any shows at all. And he sort of mentored me to help me learn how to create the stories and all the tools that were required to tell these shows. And frankly, in the beginning, he was pretty much dictating it to me. He gave me an office next to his. He'd come in every Monday morning and he would tell me the story. He would tell me to write it up. Here's where the gags go. Here's how, the gags work. I'd write it up. He'd come back Friday. We'd read it out. He'd say, "This is awful. The worst thing I've ever read in my life." I'd throw it out the window, but it might hit somebody with talent. And then he would redo it and he'd tell me exactly a new story, completely different. I'd write it all down. Little by little, I kind of got the way this worked. And soon I was writing my own scripts. And he just let me, took the training wheels off and let me roll with it. Lo and behold, the series became a hit. It was the #1 show on ABC Saturday morning that year, which I think was about 1975, if I'm not mistaken. And once you have one hit, everybody thinks that's the person we want to work with. So the next season, I had opportunities to work on all the other shows at Hanna-Barbera that the networks wanted me to work on with them. So that was Scooby-Doo, it was the Smurfs, it was this and that. And I worked at Hanna-Barbera for about 4 or 5 years. And during that time, I nourished an idea of starting my own animation studio. Well, I had no idea how difficult it was. I thought, can't be that difficult. You write some shows, you record some voices, you hire some animators, and it's not much more to it than that. Of course, I had no idea. If I knew what I was getting into, I would have never undertaken it myself. But because I didn't know, I did. And at this time, I met a gentleman from France named Jean Chalopin. And Jean had a studio in Paris that was making commercials. and he longed to get into the entertainment business. And I spoke French. He proposed that I would meet him, come to Paris, live in Paris, and we'd start this new studio together. And we did, and it was called DIC, D-I-C. It's an acronym in French, Diffusion, Information, Communication. If you speak French, ça veut rien dire, means nothing. But the first thing we did was Inspector Gadget, and then that took off in a big way. And the next year we had 5 series on 3 networks, and the next year 7 series. And here I am almost 40 years later. I've produced probably close to 6,000 animated half hours right now, ranging from Inspector Gadget, Heathcliff, Dennis the Menace, Alvin and the Chipmunks, Hello Kitty, Where's Waldo, G.I. Joe, Captain Planet, Madeline, Strawberry Shortcake, Care Bears, Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Did I say that? Super Mario Brothers.
It goes staggering on. List. It's a staggering list, Andy. And I'm gonna actually go back to a couple of things you said at the beginning, because I think they'll be very intriguing to the audience that's sort of studying you and inspired by you. Which is, let's go back to that warehouse. You were nagging the assistant every day. You were dropping off ideas. Do you think eventually you just wore them down? You know, in other words, why did he say one day, "Come here, kid"? Is it because he just sort of noticed your relentlessness, or was it just pure luck? What do you think?
Well, I think it might have been a combination of luck and knowing that he had somebody willing who was there and available. And you know, I had great learning experiences in the warehouse too. You know, Joe would come down there some days, and one of the things I had to do was I did everything. I would pick up his laundry. I would go get him roast beef sandwiches from Art's Deli in Studio City. I'm sure you've been there many times, David. And one day he said to me, you know, all these boxes of animation cells, I think they might be worth something one day.
Oh my goodness.
He said, you know, Hannah wants me to throw them out because they're just using up space. But why don't you find some place to hide them over there in the corner? Maybe, you know, because every show in those days had between 10 and 12,000 animated cells per half-hour show.
Wow.
And they were like side byproducts of the production. So he told me to hide them. So I hid them for him. And, you know, he always used to call me kid. Years and years later, I had my own studio. I was making good money. I was a competitor with them. He'd call me up and say, "Kid, I need you to go get me a very, very dry corned beef over at Art's." I said, "Well, Joe, I mean, I'm happy to do it, but you know, I've got my own company now. I'm busy. That's all right. I want you to go over there. Tell Art it's for me. He'll take you up fine. And by the way, you remember all those cells?" I said, "Yeah, of course, JB." He says, "You know, Hannah told me to get, you know, they were going to be worthless. Do you know, last year I went to the Warner Brothers store openings, because Hanna-Barbera had been bought by Warner Brothers at that time, and they had me sign autographs on the cells. I made $200,000 last year signing autographs on these animation cells. Can you believe that?" I said, "Of course, you're Joe Barbera." He says, "Hurry up, go get me that sandwich." So,
now, what do you think the value in today's dollars would be of the cells that you hid for Joe Barbera in that warehouse?
millions and millions. I know, because I took literally all of my cells, and I had probably about 500,000 cells, and I donated them to the American Heritage Museum archives a few years ago. And I know they're priceless. The collectors collect them, and they sell for a lot of money. You know, years later, I sold my company to the Walt Disney Company, and within a few months that I was there, they asked me to deliver all of the cells of DIC. So I said, "What do you want them for? Are we going to sell them as part of Walt Disney Fine Art?" He said, No, we're going to destroy them." I said, "You're going to destroy them? Why?" He says, "Because we don't want that many cells out there. We're keeping the market very, very tight." And I had no idea about this, but they took almost all of the cells I had at the time, and they destroyed them.
Oh,
so I had it in my garage at home.
Heart.
I had in the garage at home probably, you know, as I said, maybe 500,000 of my own cells and in boxes, and I donated them to the American Heritage Museum, and they're there. So,
wow. Amazing. By the way, you were asking who's going to be watching us. Well, we have Auckland in Australia, or New Zealand, I should say. Cebu City in the Philippines. Los Angeles, Colorado. It's just a long list of people joining us. Columbus. I guess I'm also intrigued, Andy. You said you wanted to be a writer, and of course, you immediately went into the field of animation and cartoons. Did you have any notions of doing any other kind of writing? Were you going to be a novelist, or was it really always animation and cartoons?
Well, I always wanted to do entertainment. I wasn't quite sure where I was going. I, wrote a number of freelance scripts, feature film scripts, and I did not sell one of them. So it was kind of discouraging. Writing is a very, anything in Hollywood is tough to break into. Probably the most difficult is acting, because there's so many people here that aspire to do that. But writing is, a competitive field also. And I saw an opening at Hanna-Barbera, and I had to pay my bills. And I thought, if I'm going to work somewhere in the entertainment business, then there may be opportunities that I can find my way into something where I'm writing as well.
Right. Now, one of the fascinating facts about you, Andy, is that you were a philosophy major in college. Why philosophy?
Well, I came across a mentor when I was in college, and he encouraged me to go in that direction. And I found it to be a really beautiful discipline. I still, to this day, I read all of the classics, and I find it, very helpful in terms of thought processes and thinking clearly, reasoning things out clearly. And, you can't have a career as a philosopher, but I think whatever you do, whether it's writing or speaking, I think it enables you to be more successful. For me, it was the right career.
Right. Was there something in your childhood that triggered your love and passion for animation and cartoons? Was there a particular cartoon? Do you have memories of really being emotionally affected in a positive way that imprinted on you?
No, I have to say candidly not. But I do want to go back to something that when we talk about writing and the importance of that, I read every script that comes out of our company. I always have. I kind of call myself a professional meddler. I like to give my notes and ideas. And I think, being able to look at a story and see where its strong points are, where its weak points are, what the characters have to offer, where is the conflict, where is the crisis, where is the jeopardy, what's at stake, why do we care? Those are all important things. And when I interview writers, which I take great pleasure in doing, the first thing I ask them is, what do they like to read? And I feel strongly that it doesn't matter whether you're writing Scooby-Doo or you're reading an episode, or you're reading Shakespeare. The same tools are in the toolbox in telling stories. You need to have strong characters, and you need to understand how to build a story with crisis and conflict and all of the pieces of that puzzle. So I find it very important to keep reading all the time and to read quality material. And when I interview writers, I like to know what they read. Sometimes I get good ideas from them, and they'll give me new things to read. But if you haven't read the classics, I think you are a little bit at a disadvantage to be successful if you want to proceed in a career of writing and storytelling. And in the world of entertainment, that's what we do.
Right. I was a communications major at UCLA, but if someone were to ask me what would be the major I would suggest for someone who wants to go into development or, one of the creative fields, in addition to writing, I would tell them be an English major,
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. It's if you have a real deep background in storytelling, the great stories, of civilization, the great authors, you have a fantastic. I still feel inadequate in terms of my knowledge of Shakespeare, because Shakespeare is just ripped off 24/7, by all great storytellers, in all mediums. So, so that's interesting to me too. Andy, you've seen many young people, you've mentored a lot of people, and you've seen young people succeed and young people fail. And you've probably seen people that you mentor in some way. Some of them succeed and some of them not so much. What are the characteristics that you would pass along to people and say, this is what you need to do and to be to succeed?
It's a very good question, David, and it'll do my best to answer it. Personally, I think tenacity is very, very important. You just have to stick with it, and you need to be singularly focused like a laser beam. I tell the people in our company, you have to come to work every day with a bayonet in your mouth and a hand grenade in each hand, and you've just got to be intent on succeeding, and nothing is going to stop you and nothing's going to get in your way. And you need to do the work, whether it's the 10,000 hours in whatever the field is or not. You just need to be dedicated and concerned to do it. The other side, of course, is you need to have talent. You have to, come to the table with something that is either given to you or you've developed. And then I think the third most important thing is integrity. If you have integrity, I think that will catch the attention of the people that you want to engage you.
Right.
So hard work, talent, integrity, those are the three things that I think are essential.
And it's interesting because you said hard work, but you also used the word tenacity, which is kind of a different thing. It's just a kind of a, it's a stick to it. It's a persistence, right? And I agree with you. I've seen that I say that's the number one that I've observed. I've observed people without talent at all succeed immensely because they are so tenacious and so determined and so relentless. Conversely, I've seen very talented people not get very far because they don't have tenacity. So it's interesting.
We did a TV series a few years back called Thomas Edison's Secret Lab. And one of the things that Thomas Edison always used to say is he had 10, I don't know the numbers, 10,000 or whatever, but it was a very large number of failed attempts to create the incandescent light bulb. And he eventually got there. And of course, and he often speaks about how many people are so close to success without knowing it at the time that they quit.
Right.
And I think, the perseverance and the tenacity to not quit is essential. You have to believe in yourself and you push yourself and you keep going.
Right. Andy, one of the cool things about HAPS is we let the audience kind of contribute questions, and I welcome any questions from the audience. C.S. Murphy in our audience had a very interesting one for you. C.S. Murphy says, Andy, I'm curious to know what you think makes a great character that expresses the greatest sense of appeal.
Wow, that's a great question. And of course, there are so many, great characters. You have to look at what are the great emotions? Where do they come from? Is it somebody who is seeking revenge? Is it somebody whose pride has been hurt? Is it somebody who is shy and is trying to overcome their shyness? You have to find the sort of the human motivators that are behind that character. What goes into making that person who they were? If you look at any of Shakespeare's great stories, for example, take Macbeth. The story of Macbeth was driven by Lady Macbeth's ambition, her blind ambition that pushed everything forward. You can find some characteristic in somebody that is going to motivate that personality forward. And that usually will be the key to telling a good story.
Mm-hmm. You had mentioned Joe Barbera, and you mentioned, I think you said the name of the Frenchman, Jean Chalopin. Was his
Yes.
name?
Yes.
Would you have called him a mentor? Would he be in the mentor category, or more of a colleague or colleague and associate?
John was a colleague. We worked together, and but I would say I've had 4 people that have really had a very important impact.
Tell us about them. I think the audience would love to know. Please tell us about those 4.
Well, certainly Joe Barbera, because of his great humor and creativity. Separately, I would say Ted Turner, because of his tenacity and his commitment to succeed in spite of all the obstacles that were in front of him always, and people telling him he couldn't do anything. As you know, Ted Turner, created, basically satellite, ergo cable television. And but throughout his whole life, he succeeded with everything that people said he couldn't do. He won the America's Cup and so many different things that he did in his life where he was such a pioneer. And we created Captain Planet and produced Captain Planet together. I remember he wanted to produce a series that would teach children lessons about the environment and how to protect the earth. And we were going to one day to NBC, your old boss, Brandon Tartikoff, to his office to pitch him on putting Captain Planet on NBC. And I remember, excuse my French, because I'm going to quote exactly what was said. Brandon
Please.
said, "Kids don't want to watch that environmental shit." And Ted got so offended. Ted got offended.
Sounds like Brandon.
Oh my God.
That's my boss. Yep.
Ted got offended, and he just said to me, turned over to me, and he said, "Let's get out of here, partner. We don't need him. We'll put it up on TBS." And that's exactly what ended up happening. So Ted was, certainly very tenacious, and he was a mentor with his tenacity and determination and passion. The other one was Walter Cronkite. And Walter Cronkite, I had the privilege of working with in the series Liberty's Kids, which were the stories of the American Revolution as told through the eyes of 3 young apprentices in Benjamin Franklin's print shop. And we were trying to get this series off the air, and it was a wonderful series with great stories and very worthy stories that needed to be told. And we tried to get some Hollywood actors to be involved in it, and none of them wanted to, and we couldn't get anybody. So we said, why don't we submit this to Walter Cronkite just for the heck and see what he would say to be Ben Franklin. And we submitted it to him, and he loved the idea, and he wanted to do something for kids of this nature that had substance. And once Walter was in it, well, then everybody joined in. We had, after that, they heard Walter Cronkite's in it. Oh my gosh. And we got Michael Douglas and Dustin Hoffman and Whoopi Goldberg and Meg Ryan and Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Sylvester Stallone played, believe it or not, Sylvester Stallone played the voice of Paul Revere. And he studied that part. He knew Paul Revere better than Paul Revere knew Paul Revere. He was brilliant at it. And I had an occasion to talk to him about it last year. And he said, why don't we reprise that role, like, the British are coming, I know what to do again. He was so funny. And so Walter Cronkite was a person of tremendous integrity. As you remember, he was always recognized and spoken of as America's most trusted man. And I learned so much.
He was an iconic figure. I mean, as a child, he was just... That was the epitome of everything great about American journalism. Just a guy with integrity that you could trust, and when and he had a humility that he constantly, he was like a humble reporter, but very thoughtful and thorough. It was such a pleasure to watch him in action.
Well, he was, and what you saw on TV is what you got. He was just the exact same person on the screen and off the screen, and it was a huge privilege and honor to be around him and somebody very, very inspirational. So I'd say, between Joe Barbera, Ted Turner, Walter Cronkite, and I'm going to give you one last mentor, which was Stan Lee. And Stan, of course, lived until 95, and he was hard at work until the end, and one of the most creative people I've ever known, brilliant sense of humor. And I had only advanced my own creativity, which was a tiny little shadow next to him. And we spent a lot of time together. We would correspond with one another every day. We'd have lunch once a week. And it was definitely a privilege working with him. And as you know, when he passed away, I was fortunate enough to become the steward of his legacy. All of his IP that he created after leaving Marvel, his name, his likeness in animation and live action, his signature, so many things that we now take care of, and we're going to launch in an important way with the Stan Lee Centennial coming up at December 28th, 2022. And then the last person I'm going to say was a mentor was Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett was the largest shareholder of Cap Cities ABC, and subsequently, when they were bought by Disney, he became the largest shareholder of Disney. And I had the opportunity to meet Warren because he had a pet charity called the Omaha Children's Theater. And one day, when I was part of Disney, my boss called me up and said, Warren's got this pet charity and we need to have somebody work with him to come up with content for them. And I thought you'd be good for that. So I said, of course. And I went to Omaha. I met with Warren and we became friendly. And a great man, very, very, very wise, also with a great sense of humor. And his grandson subsequently came and worked for me years later. And we ended up doing a cartoon series together called The Secret Millionaires Club, which was to teach kids lessons in financial literacy. So Warren was a great privilege to get to know and be friends with and have as a mentor as well.
That's great. Andy, what were the highest highs and the lowest lows of your career? And what did you learn from each?
Oh boy, David, you've got some very good questions.
Thank you.
I would say the highs and the lows share something in common. They're not long-lived. If you have a successful series and you get a lot of praise for it, that's very gratifying and it's always special and you feel good about it. And then sometimes you'll do programs that you believe in and they don't work. We live in a very interesting business. You get a report card with ratings every morning and you know how people are watching your show or they're not watching your show. So you can have, excitement, you can have disappointment, but at the end of the day, I try to keep I try to keep it measured because I know that these are all very fleeting things. Things I care more about are mentoring people, developing talent, the next generation of talent, helping people achieve their own dreams, moving forward with their careers and things that take them to the next levels, and doing content that I feel is important and stories that need to be told. I've done, enough episodes. I don't need to do another 12 pounds of pastrami. I want to tell stories that I think bring value to the kids that are a very impressionable audience that we serve, and we need to be extremely responsible with that. As you know, David, we did the only animated program ever telling the story of Dr. Martin Luther King, and I did that with Dr. King's family, and I had a great satisfaction from that. I feel very good about Captain Planet that we did with Ted Turner and the first environmental superheroes. But I have to say I'm more excited about whatever we're doing today and what we are planning to do. And if I didn't feel that way, I would do something else. I've been blessed and fortunate in so many ways in my life. And I do the work that I do because I enjoy it, not because I need to. And I think, mentoring young people, telling stories that need to be told are, very special and rewarding to me.
One of those young people, those young adults, had an interesting question that came in the comments. What advice do you have for young professionals trying to get started on their journey and may not know what direction to go in?
Find somebody smart to mentor yourself under, somebody that's been there, somebody who you admire, and spend as much time with them as you can. I would also say to read as much as you can about people who have succeeded, read biographies, and read about people who have succeeded in the field that you want to be in, and try and learn as much as you can from them. One of my favorite quotes from Mark Twain, and I know you enjoy quotes, Dave. You probably know this one.
My ears immediately perk up because, I love quotes so much.
Well, Mark Twain said that the person who doesn't read has no advantage over the person who can't read. And that's so true.
What a great quote.
And Leo Tolstoy said when he could never understand why people didn't read more. And he said, and especially the classics, and he said, who would not want to take advantage of being able to learn from the most wise people that ever lived? And I think that's so true. And every day that goes by, I think it's important that we dedicate a certain amount of time to reading.
Interesting. I kind of touched on this in an earlier question, but when you talk about that mentorship, it does make me think again about, mistakes that you observe young people making getting started. What are the typical goofs that you look at and you would just sort of flag for our young starters?
Well, I would say everything starts with character. everything. Warren Buffett taught me three things to look for with people: hard work, intelligence, and character. And if they don't have character, don't hire them, because the other two can ruin your business. So I always look for people who I believe, have integrity. And you can teach so many different things. You can't teach integrity. That's something that has to be taught at a very, very young age when kids are growing up in the family. And it's very hard to learn it later in life.
Right.
So I would say, I always look at that first, and I would that would probably be the first thing that I would focus on.
That's really good to know. Andy, you have achieved so many different things in your career, but ironically, when I'm with you and I'm watching you interact with other people, when they find out you created Inspector Gadget, that is your premier credit. It's not all the success you've built with companies and the wealth you've created for shareholders in different places that you've been associated with. You're the guy who created Inspector Gadget, so they would kill me if I didn't ask you the origin story, if you will, of Inspector Gadget. Did the idea begin with you? Do you remember where and how you thought of it? How did that come about?
Thank you. That's a very fun question to answer. Thank you, David. Well, the last series that I worked on at Hanna-Barbera before I left to start my own company was called Blue Falcon and Dynamite. Blue Falcon was a sort of a bumbling superhero, and Dynamite was his sidekick dog. And they were a wonderful team together. So when I moved to Paris and I was there starting working with DIC, I had that in the back of my head. At the same time, I had an idea of a bumbling police inspector. So one thing led to another. I had a little bit of the $6 Million Man. I had a little bit of Inspector Clouseau. I had a little bit of Get Smart. And all of those kind of put together and came up with this idea of Inspector Gadget. And of course, Inspector Gadget had a sidekick niece, Penny, who really was solving all of the adventures. And he had a dog named Brain. And Brain actually was working with Penny to get it all done. Inspector Gadget was kind of a little Mr. Magoo-ish. He was never quite, he was a little bit in the sky always. And when we started to audition the voices for the show, the first pilot we did, the pilot episode, we had, I don't know if you remember Jesse White, who was a famous old-time character actor.
Oh yeah. He was like a guy that's been in 1,000 things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
didn't he play the
Andy,
Maytag repairman? Was that
exactly? You're exactly right. That's probably, even though he's been in 1,000 different movies, he probably had most notoriety for his commercials as the Maytag repairman before he passed away. And we tried him out, and he's a great actor, but he wasn't right. So then we tried out Gary Owens. You may remember Gary Owens
from Laugh-In.
From Laugh-In. And Gary, played the voice of Blue Falcon, and he had this wonderful, deep, supercilious character to him. It was wonderful. And he coined a couple of ad libs in the context of when he was recording the first episode. One of them was Wowzers, which I loved. And I took that, and we kept Wowzers as a signature expression of Inspector Gadget, but his voice wasn't quite right, so we didn't use him either. So I'm thinking, how am I going to get this? Who's going to be? And then I thought, why not get Don Adams? Don played Get Smart. He had that fantastic, voice, and he was a great actor. So I contacted Don, and we cast him for it. We did 65 half hours there was no, let's try with 13 and see how it goes. We did 65 half hours right from the start, which was enough episodes that we could strip it Monday through Friday, and we would do 4 reruns over the year. So he did the show, and after about the first 26, he would come into the studio sometimes, and we had a backup voice guy named Maurice LaMarche who did a Don Adams impression. And when Don wasn't feeling like doing it, he'd say, why don't you have Maurice do it? He does me better than I do me. So Maurice probably did half of them as well. And many years later, I ran into Don in the parking lot outside of Chasen's, waiting for my car, and he was waiting for his car. And I heard the voice behind me, and I turned around. And I said, "Don, how are you doing?" And this and that. And he said, "I've done this many movies, this many TV shows. I did, 200 episodes of Get Smart. To this day, the only thing people remember me for is Inspector Gadget."
Isn't that something?
So I was, so proud and gratified, and at the same time, of course, I had to tell him, people remember you for everything because you're a fantastic actor and a great person. So I've had the good fortune of working with a lot of exciting people, and of course, starting with Inspector Gadget. Thank you for asking. Subsequent to that, we did a lot of merchandising. We've done all kinds of Inspector Gadget products of every kind that you could imagine. And the character is well known and still continues to have an impact. I see references in pop culture all the time. You watch ESPN and somebody will say that was an Inspector Gadget move. Or I remember seeing an interview of Barack Obama, and he referenced something about with surveillance, talking about Inspector Gadget. And there's always something in pop culture out there with it.
It's so gratifying, right? I mean, did you have any idea it would be so huge? Did you have any inkling when you were coming up with it, this would be a landmark cultural cartoon?
No, because honestly, the time when Inspector Gadget came out, another series came out at the same time called He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. And He-Man was a huge hit. It was like broke every record you could imagine. So Inspector Gadget was like a distant second. And I think, over time, Inspector Gadget really kind of sunk into the culture in one way or another. And it's still there. It's on Netflix. It's everywhere, and people know it. And I, hear all the time, this and that about Inspector Gadget. So it's very gratifying, and I'm very proud of it. In fact, a few years ago, Vanity Fair did a story which said, I think it was the 16 inventions from the future that came out of Inspector Gadget. And, Penny, his niece, had a little smartwatch on her hand that she would talk to all the time, and it was like tied into a radio computer. She had a book that was like a iPod that was like a laptop book, and she would be able to do things and search and this and that, and tied into all kinds of everything that we have today. 10 years after Inspector Gadget went off the air, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, they created Google, but search had already taken place in Inspector Gadget 10 years earlier. So they went on with smartwatches and all kinds of different things that were first in Inspector Gadget. It's still online, by the way, if you want to look at that with Vanity Fair. That article is there.
Oh, really? I'll check that out.
Yeah.
By the way, we've got all sorts of comments about Inspector Gadget. There's obviously a lot of love coming your way. Linny P., who's a top commenter for us, says, "Congratulations on all your success, Andy Heyward. So interesting to hear about." AWSM Mary has a question she wanted me to ask you. How did you come up with stories for Inspector Gadget? Was it a collaboration?
Well, what we do, and it's common, is the producers will come up with an idea for a pilot episode, and that's what we did. And I was a writer at the time, so I wrote the pilot episode myself. And then we hired a story editor, and we found a great guy in Toronto. And most of the writing was done up in Toronto. And we provided them with the blueprint, so they would know, all of the pieces. These are very formulaic shows. Once you start them, you're going to have Inspector Gadget is going to be in China and in Japan and in Rio de Janeiro, and an adventure in Rome and whatnot, and adventures going back in time and other ones into the future. But the formula is very, specific. It's like if you were to see an episode of Scooby-Doo, you could find an episode of Scooby-Doo written in 1975, or you can find one that was written 6 months ago. They follow the exact same formula.
It's like a Mad Lib book. Do you remember that? Like the Scooby-Doo plot.
Exactly.
Or just literally they go to a blank and somebody is missing, and it's hilarious. And they take the they take the hood off, the mask off the bad guy in the end. It's classic.
Yeah.
Andy, another big part of your life that we haven't talked much about as yet is being a CEO of a publicly traded company. What's the best part of being a CEO of a publicly traded company?
Well, it's a good question. You've got a lot of good ones, David.
Thank you.
It has its ups and it has its downs. You can't do everything as fast as you would like to do it. People put their faith in you and they invest their money with you. And of course, you want everybody to get a quick return and a good return and a growing return, and you want them to feel good about that. And Warren Buffett says, if you're not prepared to be in a company for at least 20 years, you shouldn't be in it for 20 minutes. A company has ups and downs, and it takes a while to build these products. So being a CEO is it's a privilege because you are the steward. And you have to conduct your life and run your company with integrity. And all of us know that that is the absolute rule of this company. And there's no compromise there. You can make mistakes, and you should make mistakes. If you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. But you have to learn from the mistakes, but there can't be any mistakes that have to do with integrity. That's not tolerated. So having said that, we're trying to build assets. We're trying to grow something for the future. Interesting. I was looking the other day, Amazon and Apple, which are probably the #1 and #2 most valuable companies in the world today, neither of them had profits for several years. I think Apple probably went close. Apple was founded in 1977, and I know in 1997 they still weren't making profits, and they brought Steve Jobs back. And then they went on to become such a breakthrough company and become the most valuable or second most valuable now company in the world. Amazon for many years didn't have profits too. You have to stick with your vision. We have a vision. We're growing assets. We're working to become the most special and unique children's entertainment company that we can in a new age where the Walt Disney Company has been so dominant for so long. And we're trying to tell stories that have character, that have integrity, that kids can take something away from and learn from, and not only entertain them, but we have what we call content with a purpose and be profitable at the same time. But it takes time, and the joy of a public company is being able to bring this to a large number of people who can be a part of it and take pride in it, and they have to go along with the frustrations that it is a ride that has a lot of bumps, and it's very lumpy on the way up. Sometimes I say if somebody's walking up a stairs and they are using a yo-yo, you keep your eye on the stairs, not on the yo-yo, because the yo-yo will go up and the yo-yo will go down. And that happens. And but what I'm most proud of is that we are building very, very valuable assets between our cartoon channel launch and the intellectual property that's being created. Things are moving very fast, and we have a number of very strong initiatives and acquisitions that are in the works as well. And there's no doubt in my mind that we're going to have a very valuable product, much more so than any of us had ever even imagined.
That's wonderful. I have a friend named Eddie Sato who was an Imagineer at Disney, and he said, David, every job has dishes and laundry. Every job. What are the dishes and laundry of a CEO's job?
Well, I've got to ask you what you mean by the dishes and the laundry.
Well, I think I think he was making a point, and it was fascinating to me that, we have this idea that the farther you go up the ladder, the easier it gets. You don't have to do any of the unpleasant stuff. But the truth is, it's just every job at every level has, tedious things that you have to do, and things that you might not, they aren't the great part of the job, right? But they're the parts that must be done. And I'm just wondering what those are for a CEO. And I think that fascinates people. CEO is the top of the mountain. So yeah, I know what my dishes and laundry are in the middle of the mountain, or, when I'm starting out at the bottom of the mountain. It was really clear to me, but what are they for the CEO of a public company?
Well, first of all, I have to say it's a privilege to be a CEO of a public company. It's a privilege to have people entrust their investment to you, and you have to never lose sight of that. I always tell everybody in the company, watch the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. You need to think of everything that we spend. If this was your money, would you make that same expenditure? Because if you can't say yes, then the answer is you're not doing it. And I try to be mindful every day that we are watching other people's money and other people's investment, and we need to be extremely cautious of it. There are a lot of things that are difficult to do every day, but I try to focus more, David, on enjoying myself with whatever I do and bring positivity to it. And I'm not going to say that I have things that I don't like. They're responsibilities, and you have to meet your responsibilities. I love working. I can tell you, I love working with writers. I love working with the artists. I love working with the creators in our shows. I like to see the rough cuts and see how I can improve the rough cuts, whether it's with timing a gag differently or a sound effect in a different way, or how scene hookups work and telling these stories. Those are very gratifying to me. And as you mentioned, I like working with young people and mentoring them. Our company is kind of a cocktail between seasoned veterans like myself and the young special talents that are coming up the ranks, who are going to be carrying the baton as we go forward. And developing those talents is a privilege, and working with those talents too. There's hard things in the company, and dealing with frustrations oftentimes of why we're not reflecting our growth fast enough. But I know how these things go, and I'm kind of focused on staying on course.
That's great. How do you take care of yourself for a job like this? How do you engage in self-care? Because it's certainly got to be, it's a lot of responsibility, and there's got to be a lot of stress that goes with that responsibility. So how do you make sure that you're physically and mentally and in every other psychologically top of your game? Because I know you are.
Well, the first appointment of my day every day is an appointment with myself. And I do three things. I start off my day every day with prayers, and I have a ritual of gratitude, because I have so much to be grateful for, my blessings, my good fortune, my friends, my family, those before me, those I work with. And I need to go through my ritual of thanks and humility for that every day to keep my life in perspective. Then I do some deep breathing every day. I do a whole ritual of breathing and wellness exercises. And then I go to the gym and I work out in the gym. I range from, do my stretching exercises, I do my cardio. And then at the end of the day, every day I go out with my wife and we walk between 3 and 6 miles. And occasionally she might get me to do a little bit of a jog with her. So between, the sort of care of myself spiritually and care of myself physically, I think, I can channel the stress that comes from the job out. I do my best to. And I'm very attentive to what I eat and everything else. And family is very important to me. I'm very blessed. I have older kids, and I have a 13-year-old daughter who I was fortunate to adopt from foster care when she was 7 years old. And she gives me great joy, and she gives me a lot of good ideas also. Keeps me focused. I bet.
Oh, you've got an in-house focus group right in your own home. That must be that's a trade advantage.
I do. And sometimes she'll say to me, Dad, that's the worst idea I've ever heard in my life. No kids are going to watch that. So I have to, when I hear that, I have to think twice.
Absolutely. I can totally imagine. Do you remember any notes you've gotten from kids throughout your career that stick in your mind where you realize, oh, that's such a great note. Oh, they had some insight I didn't have because I'm a grown-up.
I get a lot of, yes, I get them constantly, and I get them from third parties. Like Warren Buffett will send me, every few weeks, a package of notes that came from people who saw Secret Millionaires Club and had one thing or another to say. Fortunately, usually good. And fortunately, it's always citing Warren and his wonderful wisdom that he has been able to impart through this series. But I also get a lot today through social media. For a long time, I did Instagram, though I'm trying to spend less time on Instagram, but I get a lot of people who send me ideas on Instagram through direct messages, and I don't really respond to them all now because I respond to very few because I get too many and I just can't, and I get too distracted. And frankly, I'm trying to spend less engagement with social media. But I get a lot of things from different people all around the world. And you mentioned a moment ago somebody from the Philippines, and there's some extraordinary designers in the Philippines, extraordinary. And I've been very fortunate to work with a number of them, and they love animation there. They're students of animation in the Philippines, and I've made some wonderful friends. And I get input from a number of different places around the world. So
that's great. I'm going to make a last call for questions from the audience because we're coming up. We've only got about 3 minutes left in our interview, but I did want to tell you that lots more love coming your way. We had some funny comments about how people are saying now they can't get the Inspector Gadget theme out of their head. That's very funny. Another person volunteers that they do a great Inspector Claw. Clearly, once again,
I have to tell you a quick story about Dr. Claw.
Please.
Dr. Claw, we cast that role in Canada, and the person who did it sadly has passed away. He's not with us anymore. But his daughter, who I'm trying to remember her name, she played the voice of Penny, and she's a very accomplished actress, and it'll come to me in a moment. And she's constantly on TV, and she's very successful. But after the original actor of Dr. Claw, he was duplicated by Frank Welker, who, David, I'm sure you know, is one of the greats.
Great all-time voices in animation.
No blank. And he's played in every Disney theatrical movie, but he does a Dr. Claw, and he gets his voice down with that, very deep. It's a fantastic voice, and it's a fantastic caricature that he has brought to that. And we never showed the face of Dr. Claw ever. But when Disney made the live-action movie of Inspector Gadget, and I saw the movie, and I have to say, excuse me, but I wasn't happy with so many pieces of it. And they asked me what I thought, and could I make some comment? I said, the only thing I can help you now is what we can do in post. What's been shot has been shot, but we never showed the face of Dr. Claw. In 65 of the original Inspector Gadget, 65 of the second season, we would never, ever, only we would see his hand, and we would see him from behind, and we would see his cat. And that was it. And they showed, of course, Dr. Claw in Inspector Gadget, the movie, and I was so disturbed over that.
Oh, dear. That's not right. Yeah. That would be like showing Wilson in Home Improvement, showing his face. That's just wrong. That's just absolutely wrong. Yes. A last question for me, and I might take a last one from the audience, but I'm just kind of wondering, when you were telling me that story of the warehouse and all those cells and those, you began in the days of physical media. Now, obviously, everything has gone digital. I can't imagine anybody's shooting unless it's sort of just as a sort of a unusual thing to do it the old fashioned way. But what do you think of the changes in technology? Have they made the art form better? And how have you managed to keep yourself so current with all of it along the way?
Well, I think, the changes of technology are fantastic. And at the end of the day, though, it still comes down to telling stories and having interesting characters. The changes in technology merely are the vehicles that we use to tell those stories and to get those stories out there. But you can't duplicate a character who is seeking revenge. You can't duplicate a personality who has one emotion or another, whatever it is that is driving a story forward. That is not about technology. So the technologies enable us to bring these stories to life in different ways and to distribute them in different ways in greater and greater efficiencies. And that's all wonderful. And even as we move into AI, it's still going to come down to that. But I think, the key is still always going to be storytelling. That's not going to change. That's not going to change. As to how I stay up with this, I'm sort of an amateur scientist. I've always been into that, as you know. I think you know, David. I'm on the board of Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. I'm very interested in physics and science, and I like to follow all of the new innovations in technology. And to the extent that I can insert myself around people who are in that world. I do, and I try to learn as much as I can and stay. My wife says I'm a 9-year-old. So, in fact, my 13-year-old daughter says I'm a 7-year-old. So there you go. It's hard to get respect around here.
Andy, I'd like to make a last question I'm going to pass along from the audience because it's such a lovely question from Michelle Alexander. What story stands out for you as your favorite kind of story to tell?
These are such, wonderful questions, and thank you for that question. I think I'm going to answer it in general, and then I'm going to answer it in specific. I think my favorite stories to tell are stories with characters that are very, very identifiable, and people can look at them and feel connected to that character and engage with the story. I can't tell the story. I can't see the story anymore of the evil twin brother. We've seen that story 50,000 times. To the extent that we can come up with things that are new and fresh, that's wonderful. But they have to be somehow able to move. And, as I'm getting older, I'm caring more about stories that make us better people and make our world a better place. Stories of inclusivity are important. Stories of diversity are important. Stories that help people to get along and be empathetic with one another are important. We're doing a wonderful series now I'm so proud of. It was Stan Lee's last creation called Superhero Kindergarten, and it stars Arnold Schwarzenegger. And these are a bunch of superhero kids who are learning to use their powers, and how Arnold is teaching them to do them responsibly because he's a former superhero himself in the show. But one of the things I'm most proud of is in the last episode of the series, we introduce a new superhero to the classroom who is a youngster who is in a wheelchair. And we need to see characters that people can relate to and feel positive about, and so that anybody can think, I'm not disabled, I'm not this, I'm not that. I can be as strong, I can be as fast, I can be as smart, I can accomplish just as much. And I want people to see stories that are uplifting and positive and that make us a better society.
What a perfect way to end our interview, Andy. Thank you for inspiring us. Thank you for the work that you continue to do. And thank you for taking the time to pass along your wisdom to another generation of creative people. Generation Z, the millennial generation, and even Generation Alpha.
David, thank you. Great questions. Thank you for all the kind words, and I'll do my very best to live up to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. To the audience members, thank you for being with us. You're wonderful. I'm sorry I couldn't get to everybody's questions and everyone's comments. I hope this has been a worthwhile experience for you. I always love feedback. Feel free to message me here on Haps, and we will see you next time. Have a nice evening, everyone. Or nice day, nice morning, nice afternoon, wherever you are around the world.
Thank you, David.
Goodbye from LA.